Utapau was one of the last battlegrounds of the Clone Wars, infamous as the place where Obi-Wan Kenobi fought one last battle with General Grievous. During the Battle of Utapau, the planet's sinkhole cities were crowded with battle droids and clone troopers, and in all the chaos, it's easy for viewers to forget that people actually lived on the planet. In fact, there were not one but two sentient species native to Utapau, the Yutai and the Pau'ans. Both species were pretty badly slept on by the Star Wars fandom, despite the fact that their shared culture was highly unique and intensely creepy. In this video, we'll be telling you all about the natives of Utapau, the creepy humanoids that lived in cities of bone.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Utapau itself was a rather remote world located beyond the southern border of the Galactic Republic near the end of the Rimmer trade route. From orbit, the planet appeared to be a wasteland. Its surface was a mix of barren batches and scrublands with very little elevational change. It featured virtually no surface water, very little surface life, and fierce hyperwinds that constantly scoured the plains. But there was more to Utapau than what meets the eye. Beneath its crust there lay, from pole to pole, a vast subterranean world ocean which had been drained from the surface long ago through a vast network of cave systems. It was in the space between this ocean and the barren surface that life on Utapau thrived. Pterodactyl-like dactylians, rock vultures, and flying squid dwelt in the higher caves and in the upper levels of the sinkholes. Ruhau-whales, Rasputi seals, and fearsome Nos monsters dwelt in the shadowy oceans below. Spider-like Gintho and Varactyl dragon mounts lived somewhere between. Among this diverse array of species evolved two races of sentience. The short, glassy-eyed Yutai evolved in the caves with most of the other Utapauan species, while the tall, gaunt Pau'ans lived originally on the surface. The shared civilization on Utapau came into being around 57,000 BBY when the Pau'ans were forced to abandon the surface and seek refuge with the Yutai. Under the guidance of a Pau'an named Timon Medin, who introduced the Yutai to wind power, the two species began turning the planet's sinkholes into great vertical cities. The Yutai did most of the grunt work in this grand effort, while the Pau'ans filled government roles. This set the tone for how Utapauan society would operate in the future, even up to the time of the Clone Wars. Now, let's take a quick look at the species themselves, starting with the Yutai. If you weren't paying close attention, you might have missed these guys when you first watched Revenge of the Sith, but they were there, hard at work in Utapau's docks. The Yutai were cave dwellers by nature and preferred to work with their hands, leading to their species becoming a sort of laborer class in Utapauan society. They did the hands-on jobs on Utapau, whether that meant building cities and digging mines or wrangling Varactyls and flying starfighters. Their second-class status was despite the fact that they made up a whopping 70% of the population. The Pau'ans, meanwhile, were essentially a species of bureaucrats. They ran the government on Utapau, which consisted of a small council that, most of the time, was superfluous, as the sinkhole cities more or less ran themselves. Younger, lower-ranking Pau'ans served as managers for Yutai teams, while most members of the species had jobs in the governments of their home cities. They were known to be reserved and a bit cold, in stark contrast to the highly social Yutai. Even though they were originally native to Utapau's surface, the Pau'ans had adapted well to living underground, and their night vision was nearly as good as the Yutai's. Of the two species, Pau'ans definitely had a much creepier vibe. Their appearance was considered unsettling by many humanoids, which, combined with their reclusive nature, meant that many ignorant beings feared them. Even the Yutai had a sort of reverence for the Pau'ans, who they called the Ancients, due to their extraordinarily long lives, which could stretch up to 700 years. It surely didn't help that the Pau'ans were carnivores, who preferred their meat raw and, oddly, cold. Now, it's one thing to prefer your meat raw, but to prefer it cold? Just what sort of masochists were these Pau'ans? Jokes aside, they were actually pretty chill. They made an effort to be friendly to off-worlders who visited Utapau, and despite the caste-like nature of Utapauan society, their relationship with the Utai wasn't really abusive, or at least any more abusive than galactic society as a whole. Virtually all Utai had a dislike for administrative jobs, much like the Pau'ans, and most beings had a dislike for manual labor, and for the most part, the two were content to give the other what they considered the hard work. That's not to say that caste systems like this can in any way be considered good, but in the fairly dystopian world that is the Star Wars universe, Utapau was rather decent. The spectacular societies built by the Utapauans were much more interesting than either species was on its own. On a world as harsh as Utapau, survival was guaranteed to be a struggle, but the Utai and the Pau'ans came up with some pretty creative ways to overcome the challenges they faced. The Utai found ways to tame many of Utapau's native beasts, particularly Varictyl and Dactylians, which often served as mounts or beasts of burden. Additionally, as we briefly mentioned earlier, the sinkhole cities were powered by massive Pau'an-designed wind turbines, which supplied 99% of the planet's power. It's particularly poetic that these were of Pau'an design, as the very hyperwinds that the Pau'ans had figured out how to harness were what drove them underground in the first place. Buildings on Utapau were largely built with metal and stone, but the Utapauans regularly incorporated a much more unorthodox building material into their structures: bones. On a planet with no trees, massive bones were a decent replacement for lumber in construction projects, and Utapau's sinkhole cities featured a whole lot of what the locals called Ossic architecture. Per this style, architects incorporated partial skeletons of massive whales into their structures, giving Utapauan cities a distinctive, creepy look. Bones were used as support columns, as ceiling arches, and even as decor. Pau City, the Utapauan capital, even had mines dedicated to digging for fossils to use in construction. Most of the bones used in Utapau's cities came from the Great World Ocean, which was home to some absolutely massive creatures. There were likely many more massive beasts down there that the Utapauans didn't even know about. The world ocean was deep and treacherous, and neither the Utai nor the Pau'ans went anywhere near it unless they had to, apart from small regions around the bottoms of their sinkholes. It's entirely possible that creatures as large as Naboo's Sando Aqua monster lived down there, and neither the Utapauans nor the galaxy at large would have known about them at all. After all, those big old whales died somehow if the Utai found their bones. By and large, Utapau was neutral in galactic affairs right up until General Grievous forced it to pick a side. Economically, it kept afloat by separating valuable minerals from water pumped up from the world ocean, which it mostly sold through the Trade Federation and its various predecessor guilds. Utapau never joined the Republic, and it didn't care much for the CIS either, opting to remain neutral when the Clone Wars broke out. Both sides ignored it until the end of the war, when General Grievous took notice of the world. Grievous saw Utapau's obscurity as an asset and set up arms deals on the planet during the second half of the Clone Wars. The Utapauans generally tried to stay out of his way, as they wanted no trouble with the Separatists. But in the last days of the war, they got trouble anyway. Needing a safe redoubt for the Separatist Council to hide out on, Grievous chose Utapau as the Council's new home thanks to its remoteness, believing it would be a while before Republic agents found them. Of course, the Republic found Grievous and the Council in Utapau anyway, and we all know what happened next. In the span of about 2 weeks, Utapau went from a neutral world to the shadow capital of the CIS to one of the biggest battlegrounds of the Clone Wars. A clone army large enough to take 3 whole systems was deployed under General Kenobi to drive the Seps from Utapau, and when the job was done, the clones decided to stick around for a little while. Utapau had some pretty bad luck at the end of the Clone Wars. Just as it finished throwing off its separatist occupiers, it found itself under the rule of the new Galactic Empire, which saw the planet as ripe for exploitation. So, that's our look at Utapau, its native species, and its bone-covered sinkhole cities. But what do you think? Are there other worlds you'd like us to take a look at? And if so, which ones? Let us know all that and more in the comment section below. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.